At the start of the 2010s, the Seattle Seahawks assembled one of the best defenses the NFL has ever seen. Unlike some of the other elite defenses we'd seen in the past, this was a unit that was led by its hard-hitting and ball-hawking secondary rather than its front seven. Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor, and Brandon Browner served as the core pieces in Seattle's Legion of Boom, with other players such as Byron Maxwell and Walter Thurman adding depth and contributing as key role players in that iconic Seattle defensive backfield. And although the Legion of Boom primarily focused on the secondary, in this video, I will be talking about the defense as a whole, which featured other defensive stars such as Bobby Wagner at linebacker and Michael Bennett on the D-line. From 2011 to the mid-2010s, this Seahawks defense was the most dominant and feared unit in the league, and helped lead Seattle to a dominant Super Bowl victory over Peyton Manning and the Broncos, as well as back-to-back Super Bowl appearances. From 2012 to 2015, the Seahawks led the league in scoring defense for 4 years straight, a feat that hadn't been accomplished since the 1950s. However, following their second Super Bowl run, things quickly took a turn for the worse, with injuries, locker room disconnect, and other various factors leading to the downfall of one of the best defensive units in league history. In this video, we'll be taking a look back at the rise and fall of Seattle's Legion of Boom. Heading into the 2010 season, Pete Carroll had just taken over as the head coach of the Seahawks. Along with defensive coaches Gus Bradley, Chris Richards, and later Dan Quinn, Carroll incorporated a defensive playbook built around Cover 1 and Cover 3 schemes, which would become a staple of the LOB defense. This scheme was a perfect fit for their newly drafted safeties, Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor. Thomas was taken with the 14th pick of the first round, with Chancellor being selected in the 5th round. This would be the start of the best safety duo for years to come. Both players would see the field in their rookie years, with Thomas having a breakout rookie campaign, finishing the year with 76 total tackles, 1 forced fumble, as well as an impressive 5 interceptions. Chancellor would finish the year with 23 tackles, 1 sack, and 2 forced fumbles. Heading into the 2011 season, the Seahawks would add to their young and impressive secondary with the additions of Richard Sherman and Byron Maxwell in the 5th and 6th rounds of the 2011 draft, along with the signing of Brandon Browner from the Canadian Football League. The additions of Sherman and Browner would solidify the corner positions for the Seahawks, who already had Marcus Trufant and Walter Thurman. Both Sherman and Browner were big, strong, and physical corners who were the perfect complement to the hard-hitting safety duo of Thomas and Chancellor. In Week 8 of the 2011 season, injuries to Trufant and Thurman would lead to Sherman earning his first career start against the Bengals, where he'd have 5 tackles, 3 pass deflections, and an interception. This would also be the first time the 4 original members of the LOB would start a game together, and this is where things really took off. The dominant play from these 4 guys through the remainder of the 2011 season would inspire the Legion of Boom nickname due to their physical and hard-hitting play style. Thomas, Chancellor, and Browner would all go on to make the Pro Bowl that year, with Earl Thomas earning second-team All-Pro honors. Moving into the 2012 season, with Sherman now a starter alongside Browner, this was the first season we'd see the complete LOB secondary in action together, alongside new addition Bobby Wagner at linebacker, who was drafted in the 2nd round of the 2012 draft. And this is where Seattle's defensive dominance really began. In 2012, Seattle's defense was suffocating offenses, leading the NFL in scoring defense and only allowing 15.3 points per game. Sherman would go off in his first year as a starter, recording 64 total tackles, 3 forced fumbles, and a whopping 8 interceptions. Thomas would have 66 tackles and 3 interceptions, while Chancellor would have 101 total tackles, along with a forced fumble. Brandon Browner would finish the year with 44 tackles, 3 forced fumbles, and 3 interceptions. And for the rookie Bobby Wagner, he would end the year with an impressive 140 total tackles, 2 sacks, and 3 interceptions. Thomas and Chancellor would make the Pro Bowl that season, with Thomas and Sherman also earning first-team All-Pro honors as well. With Seattle's defense already amongst the best in the league by this point, it would only get better for the Seahawks, as they would add the last key piece to the stacked defense with defensive end Michael Bennett. Bennett, who was originally an undrafted free agent for the Seahawks in 2009, was eventually waived during his rookie season, but would return for a second stint with Seattle ahead of the 2013 season. With the addition of Bennett, the Seahawks now had dynamic playmakers at all 3 levels of their defense and would greatly improve an already elite defensive unit. The 2013 season is widely viewed as the best and most dominant year for the LOB and considered by many to be one of the best defenses of all time. That season, the Seahawks allowed the fewest passing yards and touchdowns in the league, ranking as the best passing defense, as well as being ranked as the best total defense, only allowing 273.6 yards per game and 14.4 points per game. Richard Sherman would have another outstanding year, racking up 8 interceptions for the 2nd year in a row, which was the most in the NFL. Earl Thomas would also continue his impressive run of form, with 5 interceptions of his own, along with 105 total tackles. For Cam Chancellor, he would end the year with 99 total tackles and 3 interceptions. But it wasn't just the secondary making plays for the Seahawks, as Bobby Wagner would have 120 tackles, 5 sacks, and 2 interceptions, with new addition Michael Bennett racking up 8.5 sacks. Once again, Sherman, Thomas, and Chancellor would all make the Pro Bowl, with Thomas and Sherman making first-team All-Pro for the 2nd year in a row, and Chancellor earning second team honors. Seattle would cruise through the regular season, finishing the year 13-3, winning the NFC West, and securing the number 1 seed in the conference. The Seahawks would take care of business against the Saints in the divisional round, winning 23-15, before taking on their hated division rival 49ers in the NFC Championship game. This was a highly anticipated matchup, as this was probably the best rivalry in the league at the time, with the two teams facing off for a ticket to the Super Bowl. The game was tight throughout, with the Seahawks not having a lead in the game until about 14 minutes left in the fourth quarter. The game would come down to one play, with 30 seconds left in regulation. The Niners were in the red zone, on the 18-yard line, needing a touchdown to win. Kaepernick would loft a pass to Michael Crabtree in the right side of the end zone, but the pass would be tipped by a leaping Richard Sherman into the hands of Malcolm Smith to end the game and send Seattle to the Super Bowl. This was a great defensive effort and play by Sherman and the Seahawks D. However, everyone remembers this moment for the infamous post-game rant Richard Sherman went on with Aaron Andrews, where he said he was the best corner in the league and called Michael Crabtree a sorry receiver. But regardless of all the trash talking and chirping, the Seahawks were backing it up and were going back to their first Super Bowl since 2006, where they would have to go against Peyton Manning and the high-flying Broncos offense. The 2013 Broncos had one of the best and most explosive offenses of all time, breaking all sorts of individual and team records, with Peyton Manning playing some of, if not the best football of his career. On paper, it was a perfect Super Bowl matchup, with one of the all-time great offenses going up against one of the all-time great defenses. However, that would not be the case. Super Bowl 48 was one of the most lopsided Super Bowls in league history, with Seattle dominating the Broncos from start to finish. The Seahawks defense smothered the Bronco offense and would go on to win the game 43-8. This dominant performance put a cap on a historic season for Seattle and helped solidify the 2013 Seahawks defense as one of the best of all time. With Seattle flying high from their 2013 season, they would carry that momentum into 2014, picking up right where they left off. Outside of Brandon Browner, who had departed for the Patriots in free agency, Seattle was basically returning the same championship-winning squad from the year before. The Seahawks defense continued to dominate opposing offenses with its lockdown coverage and physical, hard-hitting play. For the third straight season, Seattle would have the number 1 ranked scoring defense, allowing only 15.9 points per game, as well as the top-ranked passing defense for the second year in a row. With their outstanding defensive play, paired with the number 1 rushing attack on offense, the Seahawks would once again cruise through the regular season, repeating as NFC West champions and finishing the year as the number 1 seed in the NFC at 12-4. For the LOB, it was business as usual. Richard Sherman would snag another 4 interceptions. Earl Thomas would have 97 tackles, 3 forced fumbles, along with a pick, and Chancellor, who missed some time due to injury, still managed to tally 78 tackles and a forced fumble. Then there was Bobby Wagner, who had now emerged as one of, if not the best middle linebacker in the league. He had 104 total tackles and 2 sacks. All 4 players would make the Pro Bowl that year, with Sherman, Thomas, and Wagner making first-team All-Pro, and Cam Chancellor earning second-team All-Pro honors for the second year in a row. The team was absolutely stacked and looked primed to win their second consecutive Lombardi Trophy. After taking out the Panthers in the divisional round, winning 31-17, Seattle would head back to the NFC Championship game for a second year in a row to take on Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. This was a wild game that the Seahawks barely survived. After trailing Green Bay 19-7, with less than 3 minutes remaining, the Seahawks would mount an epic come-from-behind victory to win the game in overtime 28-22, sending them back to the Super Bowl with a chance to repeat as champions. In Super Bowl 49, Seattle would be facing the last team to win back-to-back Super Bowls, in Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. Similar to the year before, it was another great matchup of offensive versus defensive firepower. However, this time it would not be a one-sided blowout, as the game was neck and neck throughout. Both teams would go back and forth, with neither side able to pull away from the other. With just over 2 minutes left in the game, Brady would give the Pats a 28-24 lead, following a touchdown pass to Julian Edelman. However, Seattle would immediately respond by quickly moving the ball down the field and setting themselves up for a huge play. Reminiscent of the David Tyree helmet catch, Seattle's Jermaine Kearse would make one of the craziest catches I've ever seen. With just over a minute left, Russell Wilson would loft a pass down the right sideline that would first be deflected by Malcolm Butler, before taking another deflection off of Kearse's leg and then landing perfectly in his hands while laid out on his back. The Seahawks now had the ball on the Patriots' 5-yard line with under a minute to go. On the very next play, Marshawn Lynch would carry the ball for 4 yards, going down just 1 yard short of the end zone. Seattle was on the cusp of taking home its second straight Lombardi and further solidifying this team's legacy as one of the all-time great teams in league history. And then it happened. Russell Wilson would try and squeeze the ball into a very tight window on the goal line, but would instead be picked off by Malcolm Butler to end the game. This was a shocking and devastating end to the Seahawks season, and in my opinion, is where everything began to fall apart for Seattle. Because of how brutal and gut-wrenching that loss was, especially with everything that was on the line. To a certain extent, there was no coming back from that. The anger and frustration felt by the Seahawks players towards Pete Carroll and his decision to call that play was well documented at the time. Not only could you see the disgust on their faces at that moment, but afterwards, we began hearing stories about Pete Carroll giving Russell Wilson special treatment and even going as far as asking his teammates to take it easy on him during practice, painting a picture of a disconnected locker room. This is why some people allege that Carroll chose to throw the ball on that play, because he wanted Russell Wilson to be the one to score the winning touchdown, rather than Marshawn Lynch or someone else getting that credit. Regardless of the reason, it was clear after the Super Bowl that something had changed, and this was the beginning of the end for the LOB era in Seattle. Although the Seahawks would once again lead the league in scoring defense in 2015, that would be the last time they accomplished this feat during the LOB era, and we began to slowly see the cracks start to form with this team. Over the next few seasons, as the defensive numbers began to slip, we were also seeing a once dominant postseason team unable to find that same success. The Seahawks would lose in the divisional round of the playoffs in 2015 and 2016, before going 9-7 and missing the playoffs altogether in the 2017 season. And for me, 2017 is where the LOB era officially came to an end. Along with missing out on the postseason that year, Seattle would also lose two of its core players. Cam Chancellor, who had missed the last part of the season due to a neck injury, would ultimately have to retire from football altogether in 2018 after failing to be cleared medically. The team would also lose Richard Sherman due to contract disputes. After failing to take a pay cut, the Seahawks would eventually make the decision to cut Sherman from the roster in March of 2018, effectively putting an end to the LOB as we'd known it. Somehow, things managed to get even worse for the Seattle defense. After sitting out all of training camp in the preseason looking for a new contract, Earl Thomas would finally return to the Seahawks for Week 1 of the 2018 regular season without a long-term deal in place. Unfortunately for him, during their Week 4 matchup against the Cardinals, Thomas would suffer a broken leg, putting an end to his season and jeopardizing the long-term extension he was looking for. As Thomas was being carted off the field, cameras caught him flipping off Pete Carroll on the Seattle sideline as he went by. That would be the last time Earl Thomas played for the Seahawks. It was yet another unceremonious exit for one of the franchise's all-time great players, as well as the loss of the last remaining member of that iconic LOB secondary. As we've seen many times before, all good things must come to an end, and when it comes to sports and the end of an era, or the end of a dynasty, it often doesn't end well, with everyone riding off into the sunset. And for the LOB, it was no different. Although it was an unfortunate way to end things, it doesn't take anything away from what this group of guys were able to accomplish, both individually and collectively. Between them, Sherman, Thomas, and Chancellor earned 14 Pro Bowl selections, 6 first-team All-Pro selections, and 4 second-team All-Pro nods. As a group, they managed to reach that ultimate prize of a Super Bowl title, while also solidifying themselves as one of the best defensive units of all time. And on that note, that's going to wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'd really appreciate it if you considered subscribing to the channel and liking the video. Let me know your thoughts on the LOB era in the comments below, as well as any suggestions for a team, player, or topic you'd like me to cover. As always, I appreciate you watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.